After Linda moved out, we could at least be civil with each other, and that the distance would help us both cool off. But it turns out I was really wrong about that. So, here's the big news. I found out from a friend that Linda has been making some very serious allegations against me. Apparently she's telling people that she didn't leave my house because of the tension between us or the boundaries I set. No, according to her, she left because I was flirting with her and being inappropriate. When I first heard this, I was stunned. Like I couldn't even process what I was hearing. My friend called me up out of the blue, and the way they started the conversation, I could tell something was up. They said they'd heard some concerning things from mutual acquaintances and thought I should know what was being said about me. I braced myself, but nothing could have prepared me for what they told me. Linda is telling people that I was making advances toward her, that I was behaving in a way that made her feel uncomfortable, and that's why she had to move out. When my friend told me this, I just sat there, speechless. I couldn't believe it. This is the same girl who's been living in my house for months, who I've tried to help and support, despite everything. And now she's saying these horrible things about me? Darlene and I were completely at a loss after hearing what Linda was saying. We knew we couldn't just let these accusations fester, so Darlene decided to call Linda and confront her directly. I was sitting right next to her, and I could hear the conversation, at least Darlene's side of it. She started off calm, just asking Linda why she was saying these things and trying to get her to understand how serious the accusations were. But Linda didn't back down. Instead, she doubled down on the lies. She told Darlene that she didn't know everything, that I had been inappropriate with her for a long time, and that she wasn't going to cover up for me anymore. Hearing that was like a punch to the gut. I could feel my stomach drop as Linda kept insisting on these lies. I could see the pain on Darlene's face as she tried to reason with her, to remind her of all the times I'd tried to help her, of how much we'd done for her. But Linda just wouldn't budge. She kept saying that Darlene didn't know the whole story and that she was only speaking the truth now. I don't know where we go from here. The accusations are out there now and Linda isn't backing down. She's even telling more people that she's been enduring my so-called inappropriate behavior for a long time. Do you guys have any suggestions? Update 3. Hi everyone. It's been over a month since my last update, and I just wanted to fill you in on what's been happening, or rather, not happening. Honestly, I was expecting some kind of resolution or at least more drama given everything that's gone down, but things have been strangely quiet on the Linda front. I didn't need to take any action because, out of nowhere, Linda just stopped spreading those awful allegations about me. I didn't hear any more rumors. And people stopped giving me those sideways looks that were starting to make me paranoid. Well, that peace didn't last as long as I hoped. Yesterday I found out why Linda had a sudden change of heart, and let me tell you, it threw me for a loop. Turns out, the reason Linda stopped spreading those lies wasn't because she had a change of heart or decided to do the right thing. Nope. It was because Darlene agreed to pay her rent for a whole year to keep her quiet. I asked Darlene why she'd do something like this without even discussing it with me first. She said she's just tired of the fighting, the accusations, and the toxic environment that's been hanging over us for months. She told me she's lived her entire life in complicated, toxic situations, first with Tom, and now with this, and she just doesn't have it in her anymore to keep battling. I still don't agree with her decision. And I'm not thrilled about the idea of essentially paying off Linda to keep the peace. But after thinking about it and talking it out with Darlene, I've decided to let it go. I love Darlene, and I don't want this to drive a wedge between us. I'm going to focus on moving forward with Darlene and trying to rebuild our life together without the constant shadow of Linda's drama hanging over us. Hopefully, this is the last of it. Thanks again, everyone. Your support has meant more than I can say. It was completely out of the blue her company went under, and just like that, she was out of work. Darlene's income had been a big help, especially since she'd been helping Linda out with her rent. But with no job, she couldn't afford to keep doing that, and Linda had no choice but to move in with us. I was renting a house. I knew it was going to be awkward. But I was willing to make it work for Darlene's sake. From the moment Linda moved in, the tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. She didn't want to be there, and it was obvious she blamed me for it, even though I had nothing to do with her mom losing her job. I tried to be friendly, to give her space, but it didn't seem to matter. She avoided me like the plague, and would only talk to Darlene when I wasn't around. If I walked into a room, she'd either leave or just sit there in complete silence, scrolling through her phone. Last week was my birthday, and honestly, I wasn't expecting much. I know. At my age, birthdays aren't supposed to be a big deal, but I've always loved them. There's just something about having a day that's all yours, you know? I don't need anything fancy. A small celebration with the people I care about is more than enough. So I was actually looking forward to it, even if it was just going to be a quiet evening with Darlene, neighbors, and friends from all over the town. I wasn't expecting anything from Linda, to be honest. Given how things had been between us, I figured she'd either ignore the day completely or just stay out of sight until it was over. But after I'd cut the cake and was sitting around with Darlene and two of my closest friends, Linda walked into the room. Daughter. And I know that's been incredibly difficult for her. Now that Linda's moved out, I'm hoping we can start to heal and maybe even strengthen our relationship. We've been through so much together, and I want to make sure that we come out of this stronger and more united. There's still a lot to work through, and I'm sure there will be more bumps in the road. But for now, I feel like we've made the right decision. I'm trying to focus on the positives, like the fact that our home feels a little lighter, a little more peaceful, without all the constant arguing and tension. It's not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction. Update 2. Hi everyone. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and I wish I had better news to share. Unfortunately, things have taken a turn for the worse, and I'm honestly still trying to wrap my head around it. I was hoping that. She had this look on her face that I couldn't quite read, something between determined and distant, and she was holding a small card. I'll admit, I was caught off guard. For a split second, I thought maybe this was a turning point, that maybe, just maybe, Linda was ready to put the past behind us and try to start fresh. So, when she handed me the card, I was genuinely surprised. Darlene looked just as shocked as I felt, and there was this moment of hope that maybe things were finally starting to change. I smiled at Linda, trying to convey how much the gesture meant to me, and I could see Darlene's eyes light up with cautious optimism. It felt like a big deal, like maybe we were finally getting somewhere. But then I opened the card. My heart dropped the moment I read the words inside. Instead of a message of goodwill, or even just a simple happy birthday, the card said, "I hate you for marrying my son, and I hope you Delaware." I couldn't believe it. I just stared at the words, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. It felt like a punch to the gut. Like all the progress I thought we might have been making was just an illusion. I was heartbroken. I didn't know what to say or do. The room fell into this awkward, tense silence. My friends, who had been laughing and chatting just moments before, looked completely uncomfortable, and Darlene, she was just devastated. I could see the pain in her eyes as she realized how much Linda's words had hurt me. She reached out to take the card from my hands as if hoping that by taking it away, she could somehow erase the damage it had done. I went to my room, shut the door, and didn't come out for the entire evening. I just couldn't face anyone after what had happened. I felt humiliated in front of the people I loved, especially on what was supposed to be a happy day. As I sat there alone, the reality of the situation hit me hard. Linda's words kept playing over and over in my mind, and I realized that I couldn't keep living like this. The constant tension, the disrespect, it was too much. After everyone left, I went to Darlene. I was still shaken, but I knew I had to do something. I told her that I couldn't take this disrespect anymore, and that it was time for Linda to move on. I didn't want her living in our home if she couldn't at least try to be civil. It wasn't an easy conversation to have, and I could see the pain in Darlene's eyes as I spoke. But to my surprise, she agreed with me. She knew things couldn't continue the way they were, and as much as it hurt her, she understood where I was coming from. That same evening, we sat Linda down to tell her she had a month to find a new place and move out. She was confused at first, like she didn't understand why we were doing this. But then the reality of it sank in, and she exploded. She yelled at Darlene, accusing her of being a terrible mother, and of choosing me over her own daughter. It was brutal. Linda was in tears, and Darlene looked like she was about to break down herself. But we both knew this was the right decision, no matter how painful it was. But that wasn't the end of it. We live in a small town, and as these things often do, the story about what happened at my birthday spread like wildfire. I don't know who started it, but soon enough, everyone knew about the car Linda gave me and the fallout from it. It was like a ripple effect everywhere. Linda went. People seemed to know what had happened. The folks in our town aren't exactly the best at keeping their opinions to themselves, so Linda started getting a lot of side-eye and judgmental looks. It wasn't long before this started to affect her at work. Linda works at a local diner, and tips are a big part of her income. She used to do pretty well, but after the story spread, she started getting less and less. Customers who used to chat with her and leave generous tips began to avoid her, and when they did tip, it was barely anything. I think people were shunning her, silently judging her for what she'd done. In a way, it felt like they were taking my side, even though I hadn't wanted it to go this far. Yesterday, I was sitting in the living room, minding my own business and watching some TV when Linda came in. I wasn't expecting much, honestly. I was just trying to get through the day without any more drama. But then she surprised me. She came right up to me and, with this serious look on her face, apologized. She said she was really sorry for everything she had done, especially that awful card on my birthday. Linda admitted that she had been out of line and that she realized how much her actions had hurt me. It was like a different person was standing in front of me. not the angry, resentful girl I'd been dealing with for so long. She told me she was scared, that the way things were going, she'd end up alone and broke if she didn't fix things with me. Hearing that from her was like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I just sat there, trying to process what she was saying. Part of me wanted to forgive her right then and there, to just let go of all the hurt and start fresh. But then another part of me remembered everything that had happened, how she'd treated me, how she'd made Darlene and me feel like we were constantly walking on eggshells in our own home. So I told her that it was too late. I told her that I'd reached the end of my rope and that I couldn't keep going through this cycle of hope and disappointment. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I think she could hear how tired I was, how drained this whole situation had left me. Linda didn't say much after that. She just nodded, looking like she was about to cry, and walked out of the room. After she left, I just sat there feeling, well, I'm not even sure what I was feeling. Part of me felt relieved, like maybe I'd finally put my foot down and take a stand for myself. But another part of me felt guilty, like maybe I should have been more open to giving her another chance. I mean, she did apologize and I could tell she was being sincere. But at the same time, how many times have I tried to be the bigger person, only to have it blow up in my face? It's hard because I care about Linda. I don't want her to be alone or to struggle, but I also don't want to keep living in this toxic environment. It's been a nightmare, honestly, and I'm just so tired of it all. But now that she's finally admitted she was wrong and is asking for a chance to make things right, I'm torn. Should I be the bigger person and give her that chance? Or is it really too late for that? I can't help but feel like I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, I want to protect myself and Darlene from any more pain. On the other hand, I can't shake this guilt, like maybe I'm being too harsh or giving up on her too quickly. I keep thinking about how much Darlene loves her daughter, and how much she wants things to be okay between all of us. I know that if I completely shut Linda out, it's going to break Darlene's heart even more than it already has been. But I also know that if I keep letting Linda hurt me, I'm only setting myself up for more disappointment. So Reddit, what do you think? Should I give Linda another chance and try to rebuild some kind of relationship with her? Or should I stick to my guns and keep my distance to protect myself? I'm really struggling with this, and any advice or insights would be appreciated. Update 1. Hi everyone. First off, I just want to say thank you for all the comments and suggestions. It really helped me think things through and figure out what was best for everyone involved. After reading your advice and doing a lot of soul searching, I decided that the best course of action was to establish some clear boundaries with Linda. It wasn't an easy decision, but I realized that while I care about Linda and want her to be okay, I also have to protect my own peace of mind. So, I sat her down and told her that she would always be a part of the family because she's Darlene's daughter, and that's something that won't change. But I also made it clear that she couldn't stay at our home anymore. The toxic atmosphere was just too much for me to handle, and I knew I couldn't continue living like that. When I told Linda, she didn't take it well. She begged and cried, trying to convince me and Darlene to let her stay. It was heartbreaking to watch, especially seeing Darlene struggle with the decision. As a mother, it was incredibly tough for her to see her daughter in that state, but she stood by me because she knew that this was necessary for all of us. We've both been through so much, and I think we both understood that for any of us to heal, we had to take this step, no matter how painful it was. Yesterday, Linda finally moved out. From what I know, she's staying at a friend's place for now. I was relieved, but also a bit sad when she left. I know this isn't what any of us wanted, but it's where we are right now. I truly hope that she's able to stand on her own 2 feet and start figuring things out for herself. She's still young, and I believe she can turn things around if she really puts her mind to it. One of the hardest parts about this whole situation has been seeing the toll it's taken on Darlene. She's been stuck in the middle, trying to support both me and her. Years by that point. So when we decided to make our relationship official, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. We got married within a few months, which might seem quick to some people, but it felt right for us. We were extremely happy. And for the first time in a long time, Darlene was too. But Linda still hated me. She refused to attend our wedding, which was really hard on Darlene. I could tell it hurt her deeply, but she tried to brush it off, saying Linda just needed time to adjust. I was hoping that maybe once she saw how happy her mom was, she'd come around. But that didn't happen. Linda kept her distance, barely speaking to either of us unless she had to. Then, about a year ago, Darlene lost her job. I married a lady who ended her abusive relationship, but on my birthday, her daughter gave me a card that said, "I hope you Delaware, and I hate you for marrying my mom." Almost 2 years ago, Darlene 45F and I, Jason 46M, were married, and I must say, it was one of the finest decisions I've ever made. But it wasn't easy for any of us, especially Darlene, to get here. She had spent more than 15 years together with her ex-husband, Tom 49M, and had been through a lot together in their prior marriage. And in my opinion, the 15 years were too lengthy. Tom was the epitome of a poisonous and emotionally abusive spouse. He was a true piece of work. The way Darlene would discuss her background, it was obvious to me that Tom had a significant negative impact on her. Even if they weren't physical wounds, you could see the scars he left on her, even though she is the loveliest lady. She informed me about him right away, saying that he used to make fun of her in front of other people. One time, when they were having dinner with friends, Darlene told a tale about something that had happened at work. In the middle of her anecdote, Tom laughed and interrupted, saying, "Oh, Darlene is so important at her job, nobody would ever receive their coffee if she didn't show up." How embarrassing must that have been for her, do you think? Naturally, he dismissed it as a joke, but it was obvious to everybody that it was intended to cause pain. Darlene told me she wanted to just go away that very moment. The worst thing, though, was how he ran her whole existence. He would want to know who she was calling and where she was going at all times, even if she was just a few minutes late returning home. He was constantly suspicious and would accuse her of cheating anytime she spoke to another guy, even if it was just the grocery store clerk. He would interrogate her and chastise her, acting as though she was breaking the law. She once contacted him to let him know she would be late because her car broke down on the way home from work. Rather of being helpful or kind, he accused her of lying. I'll tell you what, the gaslighting was quite sophisticated. When Darlene confronted him about his actions, he would make her feel bad about herself by spinning the situation. He'd say things like, "You're too sensitive," or "You're imagining things." There was this one time when she caught him having lunch with another woman, and when she confronted him, he told her she was paranoid and insecure, even though the evidence was right there. He somehow convinced her that she was overreacting, and she ended up apologizing to him. Can you believe that? I think one of the most heartbreaking things she told me was how he'd make her feel worthless whenever she tried to leave. Darlene is a strong woman, and she has tried several times to break free from him. But Tom would tear her down, saying things like, "You'll never find anyone better than me, or no one else will want you after all these years." He had her so convinced that she didn't deserve better that she stayed for over 15 years, believing his lies. I met Darlene when she was still married to Tom. We were both part of this local walking club, and honestly, that's where it all started. We'd see each other regularly on these walks, and over time, we just kind of clicked. She was so easy to talk to, one of those people who make you feel comfortable right away. It wasn't long before our friendship grew into something really meaningful for both of us. We'd chat about everything during those walks, from our favorite movies to more personal stuff like our families and the struggles we'd been through. But of course, Tom didn't like that one bit. He had this intense jealousy that was pretty obvious from the get-go. At first, I didn't really understand why Darlene would go quiet for days at a time. She'd suddenly stop responding to my texts or wouldn't show up to our walking group meetings. I was confused and honestly a bit hurt, but I figured she had her reasons. Eventually, she told me that Tom had a problem with our friendship. He'd get furious whenever he found out we'd been talking, or that she'd been out walking with the group, especially if I was there. He accused her of having feelings for me, which at that point, she didn't. We were genuinely just friends, but in Tom's twisted mind, any man who showed her attention was a threat. There was this one time I remember clearly. Darlene and I had just finished a walk, and we stopped by a cafe to grab a coffee. It was all innocent. We were just chatting about how nice the weather was and making small talk. But apparently someone Tom knew saw us and mentioned it to him later. The next thing I know, Darlene's disappeared off the face of the earth for nearly a month. When she finally resurfaced, she told me that Tom had gone off the rails, accusing her of cheating and demanding that she stop talking to me altogether. He even went as far as to take her car's keys. To him, the fact that we enjoyed each other's company was enough to set him off. What really got to me was how she'd apologize every time she pulled away. She'd say things like, "I'm sorry, Jason, I just can't handle the drama at home right now." It was clear that she was trying to avoid conflict, but it broke my heart to see her so trapped. I tried to reassure her, telling her that I'd be there whenever she was ready to come back and that there was no pressure. But it was obvious that the situation with Tom was eating her alive. The more I learned about Tom and his behavior, the more protective I felt over Darlene. She didn't deserve any of it. She was always so kind and considerate, going out of her way to make sure everyone else was okay, even when she was dealing with so much. I think that's what made it all the more painful to see her pulled away from things she loved, because of Tom's insecurities and control issues. Eventually, after one too many of these incidents, Darlene started to open up more about what life was really like with Tom. She told me about the constant accusations, the belittling comments, and how he'd twist everything to make her feel like she was the one in the wrong. It became clear that this wasn't just about me. Tom was a toxic presence in every aspect of her life. He'd isolate her from friends, criticize her looks, her cooking, her job, everything. He was slowly chipping away at her self-esteem, making her feel like she couldn't do anything right. Leaving Tom was the hardest thing Darlene had ever had to do. After 15 years of putting up with his controlling and abusive behavior, she'd finally reached her breaking point. And somehow, the straw that broke the camel's back was something as simple as oversalting the food. It was just one of those days where nothing seemed to go right. Darlene had been rushing to get dinner on the table after a long day, and she accidentally added too much salt to the dish. It wasn't even that bad, honestly, but Tom lost it. He started yelling at her, calling her names, and making her feel like she was the worst wife in the world. But this time, something inside Darlene just clicked. She didn't argue back, didn't try to defend herself like she usually did. She just sat there quietly, taking it all in. And I think that's when she realized she couldn't do it anymore. The next day, while Tom was at work, she packed her things and left. She didn't know where else to go, so she came to me for help. When she showed up at my door, she looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in weeks. I didn't hesitate for a second. I took her in, no questions asked. The next few months were really tough as she went through the divorce process. I've never seen anyone so worn down by life. Darlene was a shell of herself, but she was also determined. She knew she deserved better. Even if it was hard for her to see it sometimes. Every day was a new challenge. Tom wasn't exactly making the divorce easy. He tried to drag it out as long as possible, probably hoping she'd change her mind and come back to him. But Darlene stood her ground, even though it was tearing her apart. She was dealing with so much at once. Not only was she trying to rebuild her life after leaving Tom, but she also had to navigate her relationship with her daughter, Linda, 20F, who was only 15 at the time. Linda had always been closer to Tom, or at least that's how it seemed. She idolized her dad and couldn't understand why her mom had left him so suddenly. I could see the pain in Darlene's eyes every time Linda would call, crying and asking why she'd broken up the family. Linda felt betrayed, like her mom had abandoned her and their family without any warning. I remember one night Darlene was sitting at my kitchen table, her phone in her hand, tears streaming down her face. She had just gotten off the phone with Linda, who had once again begged her to come back home. Linda didn't know the full extent of what had been going on between her parents. How could she? Tom had been careful to keep up appearances in front of her. He was always the doting father when Linda was around, but behind closed doors he was a different person. Darlene had tried to explain to Linda why she had to leave, but it was hard for a 15-year-old to understand the complexities of an abusive marriage. I did my best to support Darlene through all of this, but I could tell she was struggling. She felt guilty for leaving Linda behind, even though she knew it was the right thing to do for her own sanity. The guilt was eating her up inside, and she worried constantly about how Linda was coping. It didn't help that Tom was feeding Linda lies, trying to paint Darlene as the villain in all of this. He'd tell her things like, "Your mom doesn't care about us anymore," or she left because she wanted to be with Tom, which was complete BS. But Linda was young and confused, and she didn't know who to believe. Because of this, Linda always hated me, even before I started dating Darlene. It didn't matter that I'd been there for her mom during some of the toughest times of her life. To Linda, I was the guy who came between her parents and ruined everything. So when Darlene and I started dating about a year ago, Linda wasn't exactly thrilled. Darlene and I had known each other for